Welcome back, fight fans. Welcome back. Let's just dig right into it. This is a Q&A with the IBFP, so let's just dig into everyone's questions. And the first question comes from Mike Dubs. Another question, Nuke, did you watch the post-fight press conference? Absolutely. If so, Blue Blood asked a question about Spence going to the Crawford fight to put pressure on Crawford to make the fight. Spence makes a face and says no and leaves. Do you feel that was a blatant duck? Absolutely. And I've been telling you guys this for a long time. Errol Spence Jr. does not want to fight Terence Crawford because of the skill set, because of what he can do. You know, a lot was made about the Mikey Spence fight, but in reality, Mikey was moving up in 2 weight classes, and that was going to be a great challenge for him. You know, Terence Bud Crawford, he's a special fighter. He's probably the best pure boxer at 147 pounds. And the fact that Errol Spence won't even entertain a fight with Terence Crawford, won't go to the fight, won't talk about it, but is quick to call out an over-the-hill Manny Pacquiao or even take a fight with the small Mikey Garcia bothers me. You know, you can't rate Errol Spence Jr. at the top or as the best or even the truth until he actually puts on the same boxing clinic that he put on against Mikey Garcia against a Terence Bud Crawford. And that is the honest truth. Great question, Mike. Mike does have another question as well. Mike states, I feel that Spence BS Garcia was a great fight. Versus Garcia was a great fight. Yes, Spence dominated, and I knew that jab was dangerous, but I saw a lot of Spence shots being parried. I seen only one time that Mikey was hurt, but he was never stunned. I also seen times where Spence was even hurt, and if you look at his eye, he was getting caught a lot. My question is, do you think that the other welterweights will see that and find ways of beating him, that they are at the same weight and don't have the size disadvantage? Now, that's a great question. I think that Terence Crawford is the one who could work more effectively off of that. And I also think Keith Thurman possibly could, because Keith Thurman has a very good skill set. The problem with Keith Thurman is Keith Thurman willing to step in with Errol Spence Jr. at this point? Because Keith Thurman seems extremely hesitant, and also Keith Thurman seems extremely vulnerable. I feel like Keith Thurman would get stopped in a Errol Spence Jr. fight at this point. Keith Thurman needs at least 2 to 3 tune-ups before, we even know if he's ever going to be back to where he was. So right now, Terence Crawford is the only welterweight that I put over Errol Spence Jr. I do respect Errol Spence Jr. I like Errol Spence Jr., and I have to give him that credit. But yes, that was an entertaining fight with Spence Garcia, and for a guy, to be 2 weight classes below you, to be able to parry all those shots off, away and take away a lot of the body shots. Mikey Garcia should have been dropped or knocked out in this fight, in my opinion. And if I'm looking from Errol Spence Jr.'s side, because he should have been rushed, and he wasn't. I think it was a very entertaining fight, but at the same time, I think that there's a lot to take away from this and what Mikey Garcia did if you're Terence Crawford, because Terence Crawford can calculate a lot of things against Errol Spence at this point. I think that'd be a much better fight, a more tremendous fight. But the key is, are we ever going to get that fight before Errol Spence Jr. moves up to 154? It seems Errol Spence Jr. is more interested in making a name and a brand by taking a fight against Mikey Garcia purely for the fan base, and then taking a fight with Manny Pacquiao looks like for another fan base money type of fight. They're just seeming to build this brand at the PBC. But at one point, do you have to say, when is this guy going to fight the best fighters in his own weight class? That is the true question. Great question, Mike. The next one comes from Juan Holguin. He states, I hate to ask this, but did Mikey take the fight just for the payday? Keep up the good work, man. Well, thanks, Juan. I think Mikey took the fight because he truly believes he could win. He did see flaws and deficiencies in Errol Spence, and I saw them too. But the one thing that we didn't see in Errol Spence is the fact that Errol Spence Jr. is a much better boxer than I gave him credit for, and Mikey gave him credit for. I give Errol Spence Jr. all the credit in the world. He boxed a tremendous fight, and he even made adjustments. So I do give Errol Spence Jr. that credit. The only thing that you can say about Mikey taking the fight and not being successful is that his game plan was extremely flawed. You can't come in and fight Errol Spence Jr. the same way you fought many other opponents. And that was his number one demise. The fact that he had no plan for getting around Errol Spence Jr.'s jab cost him the fight as well. So the first 2 things that you should have worked out in training camp was how to get around that jab. And the second thing is how to work inside. And the third thing is defensively, you need to use lateral movement, and he should have prepared more for that. He was sitting in the pocket too much, getting hit with the jab over and over again, which is just not going to be effective against a much bigger, longer guy. He's not a natural welterweight, so the game plan was flawed. But I do appreciate the comment, Juan. Thank you very much, brother. Maldonado S states, why are these fanboys so excited that Spence, who should be fighting at middleweight, beat a lightweight? Wasn't it obvious he was supposed to actually knock out Mikey, but he didn't, and now he's calling out a small old Manny? Why don't these fans call him out on his weight bully bullshit and call him out on his ducking of Terence Crawford? Also, this is proof that Spence only wants to fight small fighters, and that Mikey is ducking Lomachenko because both Spence and Mikey has more to gain if they unified with the people they're ducking. It's hard to argue with anything you said, Maldonado, so I definitely respect that. I will say like this, with Spence and Crawford, it's just clear he's not interested in that fight. He'd rather face Manny and Mikey and smaller guys, regardless of who called who out. He just does not want to face the Terence Crawford. That's why Terence Crawford is just never coming across his lips. He really wants to avoid that altogether if at all possible. And it's unfortunate, you want to see the best fight the best, and that's not what's happening. At this point, Mikey Garcia and Lomachenko would be an interesting fight, but I'm not sure if Mikey Garcia should walk right into that fight off of the heels of this fight. Mentally, he has to feel some kind of way absorbing his first loss, being completely outboxed by Errol Spence Jr., dominated by Errol Spence Jr., and given a boxing lesson at this point. So he's mentally, he may be off. Physically, he may be fine, but mentally, his mind is not going to be the same at this point in the game. But let's go into it. Canelo versus David Benavidez from Edward Sanchez. That would be a fantastic fight. Canelo Alvarez, David Benavidez would be tremendous. I think Benavidez would be a huge problem for anyone, even Canelo Alvarez, especially with the size advantage, the height, the reach advantage. But Canelo Alvarez is an elite level fighter, and if I see David Benavidez getting hit a lot by Jalen Love, imagine what Canelo Alvarez can do. Canelo Alvarez could work the body to bring him down. Canelo Alvarez proved that he can overcome a height disadvantage and a reach disadvantage against Rocky Fielding, and we'll see how well he does against that height and reach advantage against Danny Jacobs. Canelo Alvarez is used to fighting much bigger opponents and overcoming that advantage. Canelo Alvarez works his way in size. He has a very good chin, and he has elite level boxing skills, so that's going to be a problem for anyone. Derek Lee, you were right, Derek. I'd like to give you a shout out. You were right the whole time. Called Spence. Congratulations. Spence versus Crawford versus Spence. I think that'll be a tremendous fight. If these two guys fight, it'll be tactical at points in the fight. I think Spence would be a huge challenge for Terence Crawford. I don't think it'll be an easy fight because Terence Crawford is an elite level boxer. He has a multitude of skills, but Errol Spence Jr. showed that he can box as well. He showed that he's a very good boxer, talented boxer, but I still wouldn't call him elite because the display he put on against Mikey Garcia, he has to do that against a natural welterweight, and I've never seen him box that way against a natural welterweight because he has all these size advantages over Mikey. Can you do that against a guy who's as big as you are, bringing the same pressure you are? That is the true question. I don't know. I'm not convinced of that. Maybe he'll surprise me again. All the credit to Errol Spence. But with Terence Crawford, I still have to favor him over Errol Spence Jr. I'll say at least 60-40. PJ Pitts 8732 says, what happened to exposing Spence? Well, I think Spence was still exposed, PJ. I mean, you got to look at it like this. You're fighting a guy that's a 135 pounder and you were unable to drop him or knock him out over 12 rounds. You're supposed to be the hardest, most vicious puncher at 147 pounds. What happened to that? And see, that's what's lost in the translation. He also states what happened to elite fighting skills Mikey had over Spence. Those fighting skills didn't show up. It appears he didn't have them compared to Spence. The physical advantages Errol Spence Jr. had, the IQ, the boxing abilities, all shown to be too much for Mikey. You're 100% right. I was wrong on that. Errol Spence Jr. did a tremendous fight, and he boxed very, very well. What do you IBFP fanboys have to say? Half of y'all on suicide watch right now. Well, why would anybody be on suicide watch? Errol Spence Jr. was still exposed as far as not being able to knock out a small guy. He was still exposed for going the distance with Mikey Garcia when 90% of the pundits said he would be stopped within 6 rounds. So I think we learned a lot more about Errol Spence Jr. than we did Mikey Garcia. We learned Errol Spence Jr. can box, but we also learned that his power isn't as vicious as many people thought. It is what it is. It was a great fight. Errol Spence Jr. was a heavy favorite for a reason. I was wrong on my prediction. Much credit to Errol Spence Jr. The next question comes from KL Booze. Mikey dared to be great and he came up short. My only concern is that how will this lopsided loss affect him going forward from a psychological standpoint? I'm still a fan of Mikey and would love to see him destroy Lomachenko. Your thoughts? I agree 100%. I think he dared to be great. He came up short. He's a hell of a fighter. It's just 147 is too big of a reach for Mikey Garcia. I will say, mentally, losing in the fashion that he lost, losing round after round after round from Errol Spence Jr. being outboxed and not being able to make the adjustments that you needed to make, not being able to get inside and work, I think that's going to have a huge psychological effect on Mikey Garcia. Physically he's okay. He didn't get knocked out. He didn't get knocked down. He didn't take too much punishment. He was very defensively responsible in the first half of the fight. Second half he let up. I think that Mikey psychologically needs a tune-up or two before he steps in with the Lomachenko, because that's such another high-level fight. And I'm not a big fan of guys leaving a high-level fight, going right into another high-level fight. If Mikey Garcia, is to take the Lomachenko fight, he needs to come back down. He needs to reacclimate to the weight, and he needs to fight other opponents that are at a lower weight before he's ready. Like second tier type of fighters, just to get the confidence back, just to get the juices flowing, just to get in the swing of things, and then get back into that type of fight. Great question. The one True Phobia states, it was obvious that Mikey was too slow and effective to effectively counter Spence's retreat. Do you believe that Spence could pull off the same kind of performance against an opponent such as Terence Crawford, who consistently put hands on his opponents? That's the first question. I don't think so. I think Terence Crawford, being a natural welterweight, being able to knock out guys such as, Jose Benavidez, Jeff Horn, guys who thought that he would have trouble with since he was moving up in weight. Terence Crawford is an elite level fighter. He's one of the only guys that have actually become undisputed in a weight class at 140 pounds. There's a reason Errol Spence Jr. is not mentioning Terence Crawford, because he's a hell of a fighter and he's a hard guy to fight. He also states, I personally don't believe he could do that due to the fact on the outside Crawford owns a 2-inch reach advantage with the ridiculous 74-inch reach of his every time, and that's going to be a huge factor in that fight. Terence Crawford has more physical dimensions as well. He has speed as well. These are things that people don't question. Every time a fighter moves in on Crawford, they're likely springing a trap. And Spence has never fought anyone who could move from their 12 o'clock to their 6 o'clock in a single step. Honestly, it looked like Spence took a page out of Crawford's playbook for this one. And I agree with you. And you know what? I have to give Errol Spence Jr. the credit, because he did what he was supposed to do. He handled business, and he did it fantastically as far as being able to dominate the vast majority of the rounds, if not all the rounds. So I take nothing away from Errol Spence. Great job, Spence. Now it's on to fighting the best, such as a Terence Crawford. No one's really interested in an over-the-hill Manny Pacquiao. He also states it would be an interesting chess match for sure. One thing's for certain is that both men are going to let their hands go whenever they meet in the ring. I got Bud 60-40 over Spence. I got Bud over 60-40 over Spence as well. I think Terence Crawford is just too good, and there's a reason why Errol Spence Jr. is reluctant and hesitant to mention Terence Crawford's name. The next one comes from Ricky Bellinger. He said, Mikey took the school beat up every round. This fight made no sense at all. Mikey is overrated bum. Did y'all see his face? Now, I don't understand how you can say Mikey Garcia is an overrated bum when at the end of the day, Mikey Garcia was moving up 2 weights, daring to be great. How are you a bum when you're moving up in weight, daring to be great against a much larger opponent? That makes no sense. At the end of the day, it is what it is. Mikey Garcia lost, but he put up the best fight he could. Unfortunately, it just wasn't good enough. Errol Spence Jr. outboxed him cleanly and effectively for 12 rounds. Much respect to Errol Spence Jr. Next one comes from KOD, Testimonies, Boxing, Rap. He states, no questions needed. You're the most intelligent boxing operator on YouTube. I appreciate that, brother. And a lot of people don't realize, a wrong prediction doesn't make you less knowledgeable about the sport. When I did the Fury over Wilder, no one said this. These fanboys and trolls weren't here. But the fact that people are such big groupies of Errol Spence Jr., they can only see it one way. But it is what it is. We let these fanboys be fanboys. KJ's Boxing Corner states, are you still delusional? Well, I'm not delusional at all. I was never delusional to begin with. I believe Mikey Garcia's skill set would have resonated against Errol Spence, and it did. And Errol Spence Jr. was a much better boxer than I gave him credit for. He displayed skills in the ring that we've never seen him display before. So that's nothing to be delusional about. We give Errol Spence all the credit. He used angles, he used footwork, he boxed. He did a beautiful job. All the credit in the world to Errol Spence Jr. Next question comes from Ricky Bellinger. He said, now y'all talking about Crawford. Well, we were actually always talking about Terence Crawford. We were actually always wanting that fight even before Mikey Garcia. It's Errol Spence who we're not interested in that fight. Why did Mikey lose? From Fax Tellerman. I think Mikey Garcia lost because his game plan was flawed. I think Mikey Garcia should have had a much better game plan. I think Mikey Garcia should have came with it much better. I think Mikey Garcia should have, he should have used lateral movement, and he should have trained to overcome Errol Spence Jr.'s jab and size. He was trying to bang in the inside like he did against Robert Easter. You cannot fight Errol Spence Jr. the same way you fought Robert Easter. You just simply can't do that. And his game plan was too flawed. That's why Mikey Garcia lost. He didn't have an effective game plan to overcome the jab. He didn't have a plan, B, C, or D. His plan was still simply the same round after round after round. I didn't see any significant adjustments. I didn't see any lateral movement, and his endurance started to wane later in the fight. He has a lot of heart and grit. He fought tough. I give Mikey all the credit in the world, but unfortunately, the game plan was too flawed. That's why Mikey Garcia lost. Errol Spence Jr. was a much better boxer than Mikey Garcia, and that's why Mikey lost as well. So we give all the credit to Errol Spence for doing what he was supposed to do against a much smaller Mikey Garcia. Nav 10, No TV 10 says Spence fought a beautiful game plan. His legs were his best friend. Mikey could not get in, and Spence used his reach to make Mikey look silly. To think that Spence would fight on the outside is the main reason Mikey did not want to fight Terence Crawford. And I agree with you, because Mikey wanted a guy to come inside and bang with him. Errol Spence Jr. didn't want to bang with Mikey Garcia. He wanted to fight on the outside. He wanted to fight that same way. And that's what he did. And you know what? All the credit to Errol Spence Jr. for fighting a beautiful and smart game plan. And pretty much they did what Mikey Garcia did not want them to do. Great question. Black Wall Street says, how many rounds will Mikey lose against Loma? I don't know if Mikey will lose against Loma or not. If Mikey went into a fight with Lomachenko right now, I would favor Vasyl Lomachenko, just for the simple fact that Mikey Garcia has to be mentally affected by this loss at this point. You can't take this type of loss and still be the same guy right away. But I think if Mikey get a few tune-ups, I think that that's a 50-50 fight with him and Vasyl Lomachenko. Now that we know that Mikey Garcia's skills aren't what they appear to be, we still know Mikey's a great fighter, top-level fighter, but at 135 and 140 pounds. Marlon L. said, hi, did Mikey... I'm not going to read this disrespectful comment, but... so we'll just keep going. Let's see. And let's see if there's any other ones. How does it feel to have a boxing channel and don't know anything about boxing? Nothing to date, so we don't know anything about boxing. But you are the same guy that stated that Errol Spence Jr. would stop Mikey Garcia, put him out on a stretcher, and he couldn't even get a knockdown. How do you feel not knowing anything about boxing? You have to be honest and unbiased, Marlon. Marlon also states, I thought Mikey had the better corner. What happened? I thought Mikey was the superior boxer. What happened? You're absolutely right. Mikey Garcia is not a superior boxer to Errol Spence Jr., and his corner was not the better corner that night. They were outclassed and showed up the entire fight. Nothing but credit to Errol Spence Jr. and his corner, Derek James. They did a fantastic job preparing Errol Spence Jr. to use angles, use footwork, to get in and out, to make Mikey Garcia fight a fight that he didn't expect to fight. And the fact that Mikey Garcia had no other plans for that type of fight is why he lost that fight. The fact that his corner had no instructions and adjustments is why he lost that fight. All the credit to you, Marlon. You got your prediction right. Errol Spence Jr. did win, but he didn't get the stoppage or knockdown of a much smaller man. So in that regard, he was still exposed in that way. But it was a hell of a fight. We give nothing but credit to Errol Spence Jr. for outboxing Mikey. Marlon has another question. He said, how does Errol the Truth Spence name taste in your mouth? Well, he's not the truth. Because at the end of the day, beating a guy from 135 pounds doesn't make you the truth. Beating another world champion at 147 pounds named Terence Crawford would make him the truth. Should he beat Terence but Crawford, I would give him nothing but credit and say, at the end of the day, Errol Spence Jr., it's the truth. But he has to beat Terence Crawford at 147 pounds. I have not seen him do that. I need to be able to see him beat an elite level, top level fighter like a Terence but Crawford for me to call him that. But I definitely appreciate the comment. This has been another Q&A with the IBFP. Please share, like, and you must absolutely subscribe.